I sound like a victim. Like this entire episode, I'm just like, oh my God, this is an excuse, that's an excuse. But I'm just showing you the reality of what happened so that maybe you guys can listen to this and kind of plan ahead or learn from my mistakes and, just learn essentially from what happened to me. Welcome to the Turn Your Followers into Clients podcast. I'm Vanessa Lau, and my mission is to help new coaches, content creators, and corporate escapees get visible and get paid. I went from quitting my corporate job with no backup plan to suddenly building a multiple seven-figure business in less than 2 years thanks to the power of social media. My life changed in an entire year, and I believe yours can too. So boss, let's help you get visible and get paid, and dive into today's episode. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to expose myself and talk about the reasons why I stopped podcasting for basically half a year, ever since I launched my podcast last year in 2020. Now, this podcast I launched in I think March of 2020, and then I basically stopped doing all content on July 2020. And right now, as we speak, it's April 2021. So it has been a long time coming since this podcast has literally been in hibernation. And I learned a lot from managing a podcast for that brief period of time and having a lot of success with it as well. When we launched the podcast, we were getting about 5,000, 10,000 listens a week. It was really successful. A lot of leads actually came from the podcast. A lot of people enrolled in my program because of the podcast. It was a really nice lead generator. And on top of that, during the first few months when it was really active, it was charting. It was charting in the marketing category. Now, of course, it wasn't top charting like with Amy Porterfield, Jenna Kutcher, and everyone like that. It was closer to the bottom. But for a new podcast, I was pretty impressed. And so why did I stop? Why did I just basically stop being consistent? Why did I stop practicing what I was preaching about consistency? Now, this episode's going to explore that. I'm going to talk about the top 6 mistakes that I realized I made, which led to my podcast being completely inactive until now, basically. And so let's get started with it right away. The first mistake that I made is I rushed into creating the podcast and launching it because of scarcity, because of FOMO, and because of pressure. Now, obviously, I'm not blaming anyone for this, but essentially the reason why I launched my podcast to begin with is because during that month, I actually was featured in a podcast episode with Mike Stelzner over on the Social Media Examiner podcast. And that was my very first time working with them. I was so excited. I've never been on such a big podcast before. And Mike Stelzner, who is incredible. If you ever get the opportunity to speak to that man, you are in good company. Every time I speak to him, he is always willing to help me out. He's actually the person who inspired me to relaunch my podcast again with a better state of mind, with a better intention. And he also gave me such incredible tips for audio setup and everything like that, which I'm very grateful for. But essentially, when I was doing my podcast episode with him, before we do the episode, we usually have banter, we usually talk. And then after the episode, we also kind of hang around and we talk as well. And he said, hey, are you going to be launching a podcast? Because I'm going to give you a lot of traffic by you being on this podcast. And I think that it would be very strategic for you and very smart of you to have the podcast up and running. And I was like, oh my God, you are so right. I'm going to get so much visibility from being on the Social Media Examiner podcast. And it would be such a missed opportunity to not send that traffic to my podcast. And so I timed my podcast launch basically at the same time that episode was being released. But I didn't consider so many other facts like, hey, number one, am I ready? Is my team ready? Is my YouTube consistent? Can I actually realistically move on to another platform? What is my actual strategy with the podcast? I never thought of that. I didn't even have a content plan. I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to film a few episodes and get that podcast up and running by the time that my episode airs with the Social Media Examiner. That was my thought process. And so already the foundation wasn't there. I wasn't being strategic. I was rushing into it. So that was the first mistake that I made, which was essentially launching a podcast, not necessarily for the wrong reasons. It was definitely strategic and it was smart on my part, but without considering the other elements of my business before adding on another platform. We all know if you can't be consistent on Instagram, if you can't be consistent on YouTube, then why the heck are you starting another platform? That's why a lot of people fail as content creators, because they get a lot of FOMO and then they start literally trying to be on every platform, but not necessarily being consistent or mastering any of them. And then they all fail. And so that was a huge mistake I made by adding the podcast before I was necessarily ready, because at that point in time, my YouTube channel was still pretty spotty when it comes to consistency. And I was also in the process of hiring team members, prepping for a launch. There was just a lot going on. I didn't have a robust workflow to support that podcast, even though it was wildly successful during the time period that I had it running. The second mistake that I made was I white knuckled everything. And what I mean by white knuckling, if you're like watching the episode on YouTube, it's like this, like you're literally clenching your fist, Arthur meme style. And you're like, I'm going to white knuckle this. I'm going to do everything myself. Things have to be a certain way. And I am just stubborn and not taking any other opinions or asking for any other help. And so I white knuckled the entire podcast process. I white knuckled specifically two things. The first thing I white knuckled was solo shows. I felt like I did not want any guests on my podcast, not because I don't think any guests are worthy to be a part of the podcast. It was just the fact that I was like, hey, you know what? This is my podcast. I want all the episodes to come from me. And for some reason, I had a limiting belief that, hey, if I invite a guest to this podcast, that episode's not going to be as valuable if I did it myself. It's a weird thought. And I think it comes from me projecting my own podcast listening preferences. So for example, when I listen to someone else's podcast, most times I enjoy their solo shows way more than I enjoy interviews or guest experts or anything like that. And that's just me. I don't know if other people are like that, but I projected my own preferences onto my own podcast, and I just did not want to invite anyone. And so then I had to create even more content from scratch myself. And so that impacted my consistency, and it put me at capacity because every episode literally needed to come from me from scratch. Versus if I interviewed more people, if I outsource, quote unquote, outsource some of the episodes, it's not as hard. If I'm interviewing someone, I'm basically asking questions. There's organic conversation. And basically my guest is doing all the talking. They're literally the ones that are providing the content. But if I'm white knuckling everything and doing each episode as a solo show, that's going to take up more time, more energy, and more creative juices from me. And so I think that's also a reason why I burned out. Another thing I white knuckled was editing. I edited every single podcast episode except for maybe the first few handfuls. And the reason why is because when I first launched the podcast, I outsourced to this agency to edit the videos, and they messed up so many times. There were times where they put the wrong ad breaks in the episodes. There were times where they didn't adjust the volume, because when you hire an agency, sometimes what they do is they'll do adjustments for sound quality. And there were some episodes where the audio played from one ear and not the other. Like if you were listening to headphones, the audio would only play on the left side and not the right side. That's something that an agency should be able to spot and correct. I mentioned they put on the wrong ad breaks, and they also uploaded the wrong episodes. There was also another time where they uploaded an episode that wasn't even edited yet. They accidentally uploaded the wrong file. And so because of that, I had major trust issues. And I was like, you know what? I don't trust nobody to sift through and listen to my content for 30 to 40 minutes. So I'm going to edit everything myself. I don't trust anyone. And by the way, I can save a lot of money if I do it myself anyway. So that was my thought process, which was just not correct. I should have just hired another agency to help me, or hire some help. You know what I mean? Instead of just assuming that I can't trust anyone. And so that was one thing that I completely screwed myself over with, because not only was I white knuckling the solo shows, feeling like I needed every episode to be, from scratch, organic, original content, I also felt like every episode needed to be edited by me and everything needed to be done by me. Actually, I mentioned two things that I white knuckled, but another third thing that I white knuckled was I felt like each episode needed to be over 30 minutes long in order to be valuable. And so I would literally force myself to talk for as long as I could, like an hour, 40 minutes, half an hour. And if an episode was just like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I wouldn't think that it was good enough. And so that's another expectation that I put on myself that literally hurt my results on the podcast. Not results in terms of listenership, but more so mental health, my own work-life balance, all of that. It was just a lot of work. Another thing that I also white knuckled is I felt like every episode needed to be original. And so I had a lot of resistance with repurposing. Now, if you actually listen to some of my older episodes, there are some episodes that are repurposed because I realized that it was just an unrealistic expectation that I put on myself. But I refuse to repurpose anything from my YouTube. I refuse to repurpose a lot of my Facebook Lives. And it was because I felt like, oh, people, because they listen to this on YouTube, they're not going to want to listen to it again on podcast. Or the fact that, hey, it's very obvious that this is repurposed. What if that turns someone off? What if people think that I'm lazy? It's so silly to think about, but these were the limiting beliefs that I had that end up literally killing my consistency and my passion for my podcast. Now, those were all the things that I white knuckled. So those are already like 4 mistakes that I made. But another mistake that I made when I launched the podcast is the fact that I didn't adjust the podcast to my, preferences or to my best speaking style. So right now, as I'm filming this episode, I actually have video turned on. And I'm looking at a camera right now. And now with this new podcast strategy, what I'm doing is I'm filming all my episodes with video. And I'm going to be posting the videos on YouTube and then the audio on podcast. And I realized that one thing that I struggled a lot with that I actually mentioned in previous episodes is that I am a very visual person. I also enjoy being on camera and I'm so used to being on YouTube. And so when you get someone like me to do a podcast episode and there's no camera, there's no video component, and I'm just staring at my screen or I'm just staring at like the wall, I get very nervous, I get very awkward, and it just didn't seem natural to me. It's such a small shift. Like even right now, if you're looking at this episode on YouTube, like I'm literally looking at my screen, I'm looking at, whatever, but it's just that comfort level that I have with the camera being turned on. It just reminds me of being on YouTube. I think I present myself a certain way that I prefer. And so that was another thing that I learned is that like, hey, if you're better on video and you don't necessarily want to speak to a microphone and not look at anything or not have some sort of point of reference, then change it up. And so now I'm like literally banging out episode by episode by episode. And I feel so much more confident now that I just simply have that camera turned on. It's such a small shift, but it makes all the difference. And when we're talking about podcast strategy, I also learned that having video is just so much better for repurposing. Now that I have an actual video footage of my interviews that I do or of my solo shows, I can turn that into its own piece of content that I can repurpose on IGTV. I can even make an IG reel out of this. I can put it on YouTube and it's a little bit more engaging than just staring at an audio clip. I can promote my podcast a little bit better with more visuals than just listening to or seeing an audiogram. Like that's the new strategy that I'm approaching right now that I am really happy with. Now, another mistake that I made is, or it's not a mistake, but a reason why my podcast didn't end up getting consistent again is the fact that I did not batch any of my content during a launch and after a launch. So in July and August, we relaunched the Boss Gram Academy and it was a $1 million launch. I wish it was a multi-million-dollar launch. It was $1 million launch and I was so blessed to be able to enroll 1,000 students that I could help. And so what happened is that during the launch, I neglected so many platforms because I was so caught up with updating the program, finishing the webinar, doing the promotion and all of that. So I did not plan any podcast content. And I also didn't plan any content after the launch either. And so what I learned over time is that when you are launching a product, yes, it's so important to do the pre-launch content, which I did, but you also want to make sure you have content during the launch and afterwards, because afterwards you're going to be tired as heck. You are going to burn out, especially if you're doing a live launch. It is exhausting. And so for 2 months, I just was done. And the least of my concerns was keeping this podcast consistent. And then after 2 months of not posting anything on the podcast, I was like, you know what? This is a write-off. I'm just going to pause it indefinitely, because guess what? My YouTube is also suffering. My Instagram is also suffering. And I need to take care of those platforms first before I take care of the podcast, because the podcast was added on last. And my priority is making sure that what I already have going on is consistent and it's up to speed. And so that's naturally why the podcast ended up getting pushed back in the back burner until now. And this leads into the other unfortunate circumstance that happened, is that right after our launch, I basically had to let go of our social media manager. So the social media manager who was helping me before, she was the one that was helping me write the show notes. She was the one that was helping me basically schedule the episodes. And I think she also helped me with creating promotional assets for the videos, or for the episodes, sorry. And after the launch, my company, we had to go through major restructuring. We let go a lot of our contractors that were from the US, because I was at a place in my business where I needed to hire Canadian employees. It was more beneficial for me at the time, and still is more beneficial for me at the time, or now, to hire employees that work full-time for me, that don't work with other clients, and that I can groom up, give benefits to, really invest my time in. And unfortunately, with how things work, I needed to make sure that every employee was in Canada, so that the benefits were all streamlined, so that I don't pay double tax because I have someone who works in the States as an employee for me. The back end just gets really messy. And so long story short, I had to let go of a lot of contractors who didn't fit my long-term vision of having a local Canadian team. And one of them was, unfortunately, our social media manager. And so because of that, I also didn't have help afterwards. I was already white knuckling most of it anyways, but the little things like the show notes take a long time to write, optimizing, scheduling, all those things was just completely just done. Like, I couldn't do them myself, and I had a whole business to run as well. I sound like a victim. Like, this entire episode, I'm just like, oh my God, this is an excuse, that's an excuse. But I'm just showing you the reality of what happened, so that maybe you guys can listen to this and kind of plan ahead, or learn from my mistakes, and just learn essentially from what happened to me. Hey boss, are you enjoying what you're hearing so far? Well, I'm interrupting my own episode to invite you to my free training over at www.followerstoclients.com. This training has helped thousands of my own students nail down their niche, create content that brings them more leads to their door, and implement an easy-to-deploy social media funnel that helps them close clients like a boss. This training is perfect for anyone who is starting out in business and wants to know the roadmap to making 10K months, regardless if you're a new coach, content creator, or corporate escapee. By the end of this training, you are guaranteed to walk away with strategies that you can implement instantly. The best part is that this training is absolutely free and breaks down my entire methodology to signing paid clients, plus complimentary trainings that I don't share anywhere else on my free channels. Register today at www.followerstoclients.com. Link is in the description box below. I can't wait to see you there. And now let's get back into the episode. Now what I should have done is, if I let go of that social media manager, maybe I could have hired another one, but hiring takes a long time, especially if you want to hire great people and if you have other things going on in your business, it takes a while. Back in August was when me and my operations manager was talking about expanding our team and hiring 4 new people. And it wasn't until March of 2021 when we actually onboarded all 4 of these people. It took a long time to put everything together, because it's not just about hiring that person. It's not just about interviewing. It's not just about whatever, but it's about when you hire someone into your business, you want to make sure that they don't leave. And a big reason why someone would leave is if you have a messy as heck back end, you have no training materials for them in place, you have nothing structurally that's going to help support them in their role. And so from basically after the launch, there was a period where I just literally could not do anything. And then once everything was up and running again, we had to fix our systems. We had to make sure all of our SOPs was clear. What processes do we have? What training materials do we have? Do we even have an employee handbook? Do we have all these things? Because we were hiring 4 new employees all in one go. So we needed to make sure that we had all the things in place. We hired an HR consultant. We hired a tech person to make sure everything was cleaned up, to make sure that we had the systems in place to support more team members. So it's very similar to when you have more customers coming into your business, you need to make sure that you upgrade a lot of the things that you have to support those customers. It's the same thing with a team as well. The more employees that you hire, the more processes that you need to have in place to make sure that team member is successful. And obviously in the future, I'm going to have more episodes that talk about team stuff, back-end business stuff, but I just wanted to give you context as to why I couldn't hire a social media manager to replace my other social media manager, which led to the podcast just completely dying off. So let's make this a teachable moment for everyone. And let me recap some of the top tips that I have based off of the mistakes that I made with my previous podcast launch and why I wasn't consistent and why it dropped off. The first one is you want to make sure you master your existing platforms first before you add on a new one. Because like I said earlier, if you're trying to do everything and you don't have a system for anything, you're not consistent in anything, and you're still learning a lot of these platforms, then you're not really going to succeed at anything, right? So you want to make sure if you're on Instagram and YouTube, ask yourself, is your YouTube at a place where you think it's consistent? Is it at a place where you have workflows and processes and systems to keep the engine running? Do you have capacity to add on another layer to your business, aka being on podcast? These are things that you want to take care of, because if other businesses or if other pieces in your business are not taken care of, then all those inefficiencies are going to spill over to other areas of your business as well. So for example, if my podcast is doing decent, but my YouTube is struggling, well, then I'm going to put my attention to YouTube, but then my podcast starts struggling, and then it's like whack-a-mole, essentially. And so you want to make sure that inefficiencies don't spill over in your business, and that's why you want to take things one step at a time. Don't let FOMO get the best of you like I did. The second thing I want to say as a tip is, again, solo shows are great, but doing interviews allows you to not be the sole content creator of your show. You're able to kind of outsource the content slightly because now you're just the host, and the person that you're interviewing, they're the content provider. And that allows you to not necessarily create everything from scratch like I did, or think that everything needs to be a solo show. Not only this, your listeners may appreciate being exposed to other people in your network and learning from someone else other than you. I know for this year, for this podcast episode, I'm inviting a lot of my previous students because I know for me, a lot of the episodes that I like to talk about is talking about a 6-7-figure business struggles, all the things that are more relatable to maybe a more advanced business owner like me, quote unquote advanced. It's relative, obviously. But I also acknowledge that a lot of my listeners right now are maybe in the beginning stages, and I might be completely out of touch with what a beginner might be going through, even though I was once a beginner. However, a lot of the struggles might be newer and might be fresher for someone who is a beginner right now, or is someone who is in a similar stage as my audience. And so what I'm doing is I want to diversify who I'm bringing on. There's going to be a mix of advanced stuff from me, more like giving you a preview of what running a 7-figure business looks like, talking about hirings, tactics, all those things that appeal to someone who is maybe at a similar stage or aspiring to be at a similar stage. And I'm also going to introduce people who made their first 5K month, who made their first 10K month, all those things, because that is closer to maybe what my current audience is experiencing. And I'll also be layering in actual experts who know more than me on certain topics, or maybe have even more successful businesses than I do, so that you guys get a whole range of it in the podcast. And I think that benefits the listener more than anything. And it was not my right to project my own preferences on my audience. The third tip I have for you, or, lesson type of thing, is if you run other platforms like YouTube, Instagram, I don't know what else is out there, LinkedIn, or you have a course that you're doing, you have clients to take care of, you just basically are a business owner with multiple platforms, multiple things to deal with. The key things that you're going to want to outsource for your podcast, if you have the funds to, if it makes sense for your business, for me personally, is editing and show notes. Editing takes a while, depending on how many mistakes you make or how organic you want your episode to be, if you're okay with like silly mistakes here and there and your audience listening to it because it makes you more relatable, all the power to you. Or if you're someone who has minimal ad breaks and it's very easy to put in, it takes very little time, all the power to you. But if you're batching a bunch of episodes like I am, so right now, like I'm filming all my episodes on the same day, I'm just changing my shirt and, doing whatever because I'm on video. It's going to take a while for you to edit all those episodes. Do you really want to do that? Is that a CEO level activity? If not, if you don't think that it's worth it, your time to do it, then outsource it to someone else. I think editing is one of the key things that take up a lot of time personally for me and is not in my zone of genius. I don't enjoy doing it. A second one is show notes. So it really depends on how complex your show notes are. But for my business, my show notes are pretty complex. It's basically a blog post that we put on www.vanessalau.co/blog under podcast. It's basically a transcription of the entire video. I get my social media manager to basically modify it and make it into a standalone blog post so that not only the listeners can benefit from the summary of the episode, but it also benefits me SEO wise, so that if someone's searching for a specific thing on Google, they'll find my website, and that is traffic that I can retarget for my ads, all those different things. And I also add a Pinterest pin to it, and then we have a Pinterest strategy around it as well. So it's a very complex, more complex strategy than most people. And so that's very time consuming, but I'm also being very strategic with it. And so that's something that I personally would outsource if you want to leverage your podcast strategically. So those are the two things that I wish I outsourced, or I did outsource, but I will continue to outsource, and you should too if you're at that stage in business where it makes sense for you. Now, the fourth lesson that I have for you is if you have peak periods in your business, for instance, launches, don't make the mistake I did and focus only on pre-launch content. You need content to sustain you during the launch and after the launch, because believe me, if you have a launch in your business, your priorities are going to be so different than when you're not in launch mode, right? You're going to be prioritizing selling, you're going to be prioritizing marketing, you're going to be prioritizing fixing any tech issues, motivating your team, mobilizing the plan, all those different things. And your podcast, your YouTube, your Instagram is going to be the least of your problems. Like maybe Instagram for stories, you might be selling a lot, you might be doing a lot on IG or whatever your primary platform is, but your more evergreen platforms and more rich media platforms like YouTube and podcasts naturally are going to take a back burner because they're very time intensive. And if you don't batch that in advance, you're not going to be able to carve time to film videos and make episodes, right? And so make sure that if you're doing a launch, you have pre-launch content, launch content, and post-launch content, and make sure you bake that into your schedule and don't do it last minute like I did, because if you think you're going to do it last minute, you're going to end up not doing it last minute, and then you're going to have consistency problems like I did. So that's one thing. The next lesson that I have for you, or tip that I have for you based off of the mistakes that I mentioned, is tip number 5. And that is, again, episodes don't need to be long in order to be valuable. Okay, give your listeners a variety. If you're a big talker like me, like I talk a lot, naturally all my episodes are going to be over 15 minutes. Like I don't know any episode of mine that's not 15 minutes other than maybe some lives that I've repurposed, but those are heavily scripted and they're designed to be shorter. But even for this episode, I'm just like winging it, and it's probably going to be about like 30 minutes long naturally. But just know, don't have the limiting belief that I did, which was, oh my gosh, if an episode is only 15 minutes, it's not going to be valuable. A lot of your listeners are going to value variety. So have some episodes that are longer, like an hour. Have some mid-level episodes that are kind of like the average episode length, like 30 minutes. And then have some bite-sized content, like 10, 15 minutes for that person who's on the go, wants to get quick content from you. Have a variety. It's okay. Now, the last tip that I have for you is, like I mentioned before, but in a summary version, and that is record your episodes in an environment that allows you to be your best self. For me, it's having video camera on. I didn't realize this until after I realized, like, what the heck happened with my podcast? Why wasn't I passionate about it? How come I dropped the ball on this? I realized that I really love being on video. Even if it's just a camera that's turned on and this video isn't going to be put on the internet, I just step in with a whole different energy the moment the camera is recording. That's just me. For you, it might be recording episodes in your closet. It might be recording episodes in bed. It might be recording episodes on a beach somewhere or somewhere that's not in your home. Record your episodes in an environment where you thrive. Maybe it's not even about the environment or anything. Maybe it's about putting on makeup, even though no one's not going to see your face. if you choose not to do video. Maybe it's about not wearing constricting outfits and just wearing your underwear and filming episodes if that makes you feel comfortable. Or maybe the polar opposite. Maybe you need to dress up in order to feel your best self and deliver the best piece of content organically to your audience with your episodes. That's another thing that I wish I really took into consideration, because I'm like, oh, everybody does episodes this way. And, I don't have a fancy podcast studio or anything like that. So why would I film videos? But now that I've actually tried turning on camera and trying my new strategy, which is repurposing the video on YouTube, even if it doesn't get any views, it's fine. The fact that I have video, I just feel so different. Like, it hit different when I film an episode now because the camera's on. And so those are the tips that I have for you. Shorter episode today because, like I said, variety is great, but that's my candid story time of why my podcast dropped off. And now we're back. We are back, and I will definitely have episodes in the future that kind of dig deeper on podcast strategy, but I want to make sure that the podcast has been running for a while and I see the results and I see the data before I share the strategies and how they worked for me. But just know that we're going to be posting consistent content. There's going to be a variety of different lengths of episodes. There might be some episodes that are maybe even repurposed from YouTube for those people who don't want to watch videos. And also, every single episode, or as many episodes that I think fit well with the YouTube, will also be on the YouTube channel. So you get different ways to access content. A lot of people, and this is something that I want to make sure you guys know about, is a lot of people digest information differently. For me, I'm a very visual person. I like to see things. But for other people, they like to listen to things, or maybe they like to listen to things if it's over 20 minutes or if it's a certain time frame. And so try to, when you are a content creator, think about the fact that there's different people who have different learning styles, and really try to diversify your content so that you give people different pieces of you in different mediums. I know that there was one woman who, she didn't get mad at me, but she was kind of like scolding me a little bit. So she was telling me how, hey, on Instagram, I noticed that you always do these long carousel posts, and I am visually impaired, and I really hate it when you create content like that. And I'm like, I hear you, but just know the fact that this isn't the only type of content I create. This content is really for people who like reading, but I also have other content like on my YouTube that's more visual. I have content on my podcast that's more audio. And I also have literally one-liner content on my Instagram feed if you don't want to read a lot that you will still get value from. So just remember that there's different things for different people. And I also want to end off with this because a lot of people ask me what's the difference between my YouTube content and my podcast content. And this is literally an analogy that I shared with my team at our team onboarding meeting when we were onboarding 4 new people to our company, because I wanted to explain to them the difference between YouTube and podcast. Like, what's the point of being on both? So think of Taylor Swift, okay? I love Taylor Swift. And so think about her 1989 album. You've got bops like Shake It Off. You got literally almost every single song on that album was a top 40 hit. YouTube is like Taylor Swift's 1989's album, okay? It's the bops. It's all the content that I know is going to perform. Like, for instance, 10 hacks to get 10K followers, how to make money quick, how to grow your YouTube channel from 0 to 100,000. All these topics are bound to perform well on YouTube because YouTube just attracts that mass audience people who want to learn how to make more money, who want to grow their vanity metrics, all those things. A lot of clickbait material, a lot of cut and paste, like step-by-step type of tutorial-based content, all those things. Those things typically help a mass audience. It's kind of a safe piece of content, like any top 40 music, right? Versus my podcast right now, it's kind of like Taylor Swift's Evermore album. Evermore is one of my favorite albums from her, honestly. And it's really that type of music, that type of content that doesn't necessarily appeal to everyone. It's very niche, but the fans love it. Like, it's kind of that content that people are like, oh my gosh, but they love it. They love it. And it's very similar to the podcast. A lot of the content is deeper. It goes more in detail. It's more candid. It shows more of myself, more of my personality. Whereas on YouTube, it's the top 40 content that I know is going to chart, that's going to appeal to a mass audience. But for the people who really want to get deep, who really want to know me on a different level, the podcast is where you want to go. And so when you think about your content strategy, think about it as different albums, different songs on an album. Not every song is going to be the top 40. Not every song is going to be a radio hit, right? But that doesn't mean every single song is crap right? Like there are certain songs that have a huge fan base, but will never be played on the radio. But don't ever think that you are incapable, that you are a bad artist. You know, every artist, think of Taylor Swift, think of, I don't know, Harry Styles, think of Beyonce, Jay-Z, whatever. They are like amazing artists, but not every single song is a radio hit. And it doesn't take away from whether or not they get a Grammy. It doesn't take away from the fact that they are well known. It doesn't take away from the fact that they're building a fan base. And so that is my last mic drop to you. Thank you for listening or watching this podcast episode, and I will see you in the next one. You just finished listening to an episode on the Turn Your Followers into Clients podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you leave us a review on iTunes, and don't forget to share this episode with your friends on social media. Just don't forget to tag me at vanessalau.co on Instagram. Now, if you want more of that good stuff, head over to www.vanessalau.co, click on our blog, and access all of the show notes from this podcast. Now, boss, keep doing the damn thing and building a business you don't need an escape from.